The noon sun beat down on Red Rock like a hammer on an anvil, turning the dusty main street into a furnace. Cole Running Fox squinted against the glare as he guided his horse toward the sheriff's office. A body wrapped in canvas draped across the pack mule behind him. The few folks brave enough to be out in the heat stopped to stare, their faces grim beneath the brims of their hats. "That the Henderson boy?" Old Pete called from the porch of the general store, his voice cracking like dried leather. Cole nodded once, jaw tight. "Found him out by Coyote Ridge. Single shot, long range." The old man spat tobacco juice into the dirt. "Third one this month. Somebody's thinning out the small ranchers real methodical-like." As Cole dismounted, tying his animals to the hitching post, he caught sight of the afternoon stage rolling in from Prescott. The driver pulled up in a cloud of red dust, and passengers began climbing down, stretching stiff limbs and beating dirt from their clothes. Among them, a woman in a practical gray traveling dress caught his eye not because she was beautiful, though she was handsome enough in a stern sort of way, but because of the heavy wooden camera case she hefted down without waiting for help, followed by a leather medical bag that had seen better days. Sheriff Briggs emerged from his office, took one look at the covered body, and sighed. "Henderson's boy." "Tom," Cole said. 19 years old. Was moving cattle up to the high pasture when someone put a bullet in him. Clean shot, maybe 300 yards out." "Any sign of who done it?" "Professional work. No brass left behind. No clear tracks. But Tom's cattle are scattered, and about 20 head are missing." The sheriff rubbed his stubbled jaw. "I'll send word to his folks. They're good people. This'll break 'em." He glanced at Cole. "You heading back out?" "After I water my horses and resupply." Cole's voice was flat, emotionless. He'd learned long ago that feeling too much in this country could get you killed or worse, make you wish you were dead. The woman from the stage had paused nearby, openly listening to their conversation while pretending to adjust her bags. Up close, Cole could see she was maybe late 20s, with intelligent hazel eyes and sun lines already forming at their corners. Her hands, he noticed, were steady and strong, with short, practical nails, a working woman's hands. "Pardon me," she said, stepping forward. "Did I hear correctly a young man's been murdered?" Sheriff Briggs tipped his hat. "Ma'am, I'd advise you not to trouble yourself with local difficulties. Red Rock ain't exactly—" "I'm a physician," she interrupted, producing a worn leather folder with her credentials. "Dr. Evelyn Hart, late of Chicago. If there's to be an inquest, I could examine the body, determine the exact cause of death." The sheriff blinked. "A lady doctor." "A doctor," she corrected mildly. "The anatomy of a bullet wound is the same whether examined by a man or woman." "Sheriff." "Briggs," he looked uncomfortable. "Ma'am, I appreciate the offer, but—" "Let her look." Cole's voice cut through. Both turned to him in surprise. He shrugged. "Tom deserves someone who knows what they're doing to speak for him. Unless you were planning to do the examination yourself." "Sheriff." Briggs flushed. Everyone knew he could barely read, let alone perform a medical examination. "Well, I suppose, if Dr. Hart is willing—" "I am." She set down her camera case and bag. "Mr. Cole Running Fox." He touched his hat brim but didn't offer his hand. Most white women didn't care to shake hands with a half-breed, but she extended hers without hesitation. "Mr. Running Fox, thank you for speaking up." Her grip was firm, her palm calloused. Cole found himself revising his initial assessment. This woman had known hard work. They moved the body into the small back room of the sheriff's office that served as a makeshift morgue. Cole watched from the doorway as Dr. Hart worked with quiet efficiency, examining the wound, making notes in a small book. "The bullet entered here," she said, indicating a spot on the boy's back. "Traveling at a downward angle. Your assessment of the distance seems accurate. The wound characteristics suggest a rifle shot from significant range. The shooter was likely positioned above his target. There's a ridge runs along the north side of Coyote Valley. Cole offered, "Good vantage point, plenty of cover." She looked up at him. "You know the area well." "Well enough." "You were an Army scout," she observed. It wasn't a question. "The way you stand, the way you read the land, I've seen it before. In men who served in the territories." Cole's expression hardened. "That was a long time ago." "Of course." She returned to her work, gently covering Tom Henderson's face with the canvas. "Sheriff, I'll prepare a written report for your records. The young man died quickly. If that's any comfort to his family. He likely never knew what hit him." Outside, the afternoon was wearing on. Cole helped Doctor Hart carry her belongings to the Red Rock Hotel, if you could call 3 stories of warped timber and peeling paint a hotel. The proprietor, a greasy man named Dodd, leered at her over the register. "A woman traveling alone, that ain't entirely proper, now is it?" "Neither is your attitude, sir." She replied coolly, "A room, please. And I'll require clean water for washing medical instruments, require proper sanitation." "Water's extra," Dodd said with a smirk. "$1 a bucket. We're in a drought, case you hadn't noticed." $1, her voice sharpened. "That's highway robbery." "That's Red Rock. Take it or leave it." Cole had heard enough. "Give her the water at the regular rate." "Dodd." The proprietor's smirk faded as he took in Cole's hard stare and the Colt on his hip. "Now, Cole, this ain't your concern. Tom Henderson is being laid out for burial as we speak. His folks can't afford a proper coffin because they're paying Luther Pike 3 times the normal rate for water rights. Maybe you'd like to explain to them why you're gouging a doctor who just examined their boy's body for free?" Dodd's face went pale. The Hendersons had friends, and Luther Pike's name carried weight, but not the good kind. "Regular rate," he muttered, sliding a key across the counter. "Thank you, Doctor," Hart said to Cole as they climbed the narrow stairs. "Though I'm capable of fighting my own battles." "I don't doubt it, but this town has a way of wearing people down. Best to show strength early." She paused at her door. "Luther Pike. He's the one people suspect is behind the killings." "Suspecting and proving are 2 different things. Pike owns half the valley's water rights and aims to own the rest. The railroad's coming through next year, and water rights will be worth 10 times what they are now. And the law." Cole's smile was bitter. "Pike owns that too, mostly. Sheriff Briggs is a decent man, but he's one person against Pike's dozen hired guns." "Then why hasn't someone stopped him?" "Because the someone who tries would end up like Tom Henderson." He touched his hat. "Good day, Doctor. Hart, watch yourself. This town's got a way of biting." The funeral was held at sunset, when the heat finally broke enough for folks to gather. The Hendersons' small ranch was 5 miles outside town, and most of Red Rock made the journey. Cole stood at the edge of the crowd, watching as they lowered Tom into the dry earth. The boy's mother wept silently while his father stood rigid, fists clenched at his sides. Dr. Hart was there too. He noticed, standing with the townswomen. She'd traded her traveling dress for a simple black skirt and white shirtwaist, her medical bag at her feet ready in case grief overcame someone in the heat. Reverend Abel spoke over the grave, his voice carrying across the still air. "Thomas Henderson was taken from us too soon, cut down in the prime of his youth. We pray for justice. Lord, we pray for an end to the violence that stalks our valley like a plague." "Justice," someone muttered. "Only justice we'll see is what we make ourselves." After the service, people gathered at the ranch house. The women had brought what food they could spare, precious little in these hard times. Cole noticed Dr. Hart moving among them, checking on the elderly, offering quiet words of comfort. She'd been in town less than a day, but already she was making herself useful. He was preparing to leave when Jim Henderson approached him. The man had aged 10 years in the hours since learning of his son's death. "Cole," he said, voice rough. "I want to thank you for bringing Tom home. I'm sorry it wasn't in better circumstances." Henderson's jaw worked. "That rifle you carry, that's a Sharps. Ain't it good for long-range work?" "Jim, I'm not asking you to do nothing. Just, if you happen to find who did this." Cole met the man's eyes. "If I find proof of who killed Tom, I'll bring it to the sheriff." "The sheriff?" Henderson spat. "We both know what good that'll do." "It's what Tom would want. He believed in doing things proper, legal." "Look where that got him." Cole had no answer for that. He clasped the man's shoulder briefly, then headed for his horse. The sun was setting, painting the sky the color of blood. Tomorrow he'd ride back out to Coyote Ridge, look for signs he might have missed. But tonight, Mr. Running Fox. He turned to see Dr. Hart hurrying toward him, medical bag in hand. "I wanted to ask, would you be willing to show me where you found the body? I know it's presumptuous, but I've been thinking about the wound angle. If we could determine the shooter's exact position, it might tell us something about who they were." "What makes you think the shooter left any trace?" "Because everyone leaves traces," she said firmly. "In Chicago, I worked with the police on several cases. Murders made to look like accidents. Poisonings disguised as natural deaths. There's always evidence if you know how to look for it." Cole studied her. The last light of day caught in her hair, turning it to burnished copper. "It's dangerous country out there." "I'm not afraid of danger, Mr. Running Fox. I'm afraid of letting murderers walk free." Despite himself, Cole felt a glimmer of respect. "Day after tomorrow," he said. "I've got business tomorrow, but I can take you out the following morning. You'll need a horse and supplies for a day's ride." "I'll be ready." She hesitated. "Why day after tomorrow?" "Because tomorrow I'll be watching to see who's nervous about Tom's death. Sometimes killers like to admire their handiwork, show up at the funeral, gauge the reaction." Her eyes sharpened with interest. "You think the killer was here tonight?" "Or someone who knows who the killer is." He swung up onto his horse. "Like you said, Doctor, everyone leaves traces, even at a funeral." As he rode back toward town, Cole found himself thinking about those steady hazel eyes and work-worn hands. Doctor. Evelyn Hart wasn't what he'd expected to roll off the stage from Prescott. In his experience, educated women from back east came to the territories for one of two reasons: running from something or looking for something. He wondered which she was. Behind him, the Henderson ranch faded into the gathering darkness. Tomorrow there would be questions, investigations, the slow grinding wheels of what passed for justice in Red Rock. But tonight, there was only grief and the vast indifference of the desert stars. The sound of a rifle shot echoed across the valley, sharp and sudden. Cole's hand went to his gun before he realized it was just someone shooting at coyotes, or so he hoped. In Red Rock, you could never be certain whether the danger came from four-legged predators or the two-legged kind. Either way, he thought as he rode through the darkness. Doctor. Hart was about to learn what kind of town she'd chosen to make her stand in. He just hoped she was as tough as she seemed. She would need to be the makeshift clinic doctor Hart had established in the abandoned assay office was already drawing patients by her third day in Red Rock. Cole watched from across the street as a line formed in the early morning cool, mostly women and children. Some Mexicans from the camp outside town, even a few Apache who'd somehow heard about the white medicine woman who didn't turn anyone away. He was about to move on when he heard the commotion. A woman's scream cut through the morning air, followed by the sound of horses. Cole crossed the street quickly, hand resting on his Colt. Inside the clinic, he found chaos. A Mexican woman knelt beside a small boy burning with fever, while Dr. Hart worked frantically over him. But blocking the doorway stood Luther Pike himself, flanked by two of his men, Johnson and Reeves, both killers with badges pinned to their vests. "Mrs. Ramirez owes me 3 months' rent," Pike was saying, his voice smooth as oil. "Now, I'm a patient man, but patience has its limits. The woman looked up, tears streaming. Por favor, my son, he is sick. Then perhaps you should have thought of that before falling behind on what you owe. Pike's pale eyes found Dr. Hart. I'll need you to step aside. Doctor, this woman is coming with us. Doctor? Hart didn't look up from her patient. This child has typhoid fever. If I stop treatment now, he'll die. Not my concern. Then I'll make it your concern. She finally raised her head, and Cole saw steel in those hazel eyes. Mr. Pike, is it I'll buy the woman's debt? Pike's eyebrows rose. You with what money? I have medicines, laudanum, quinine, morphine, things that are worth their weight in gold out here. She gestured to her medical supplies. Name your price. 3 months' rent comes to $60, plus interest. Highway robbery, someone muttered from the crowd gathering in the doorway. Pike's smile was thin. $90 total. You have medicines worth that? Cole stepped forward. The debt's $30 fair value. Pike, everyone knows it. Pike's men shifted, hands moving to their guns. Pike himself turned that reptilian gaze on Cole. Mr. Running Fox, I heard you were back in town. Funny how you always seem to turn up where there's trouble. Funny how trouble always seems to have your name on it. The tension stretched taut. Then Dr. Hart spoke again. I'll give you the medicines at fair market value, $30 worth for $30 of debt. I set the market value in my establishments. Doctor, then we have a problem. She stood slowly, wiping her hands on her apron. Because I won't let you take this woman while her child is dying, and I don't have $90 worth of medicines to spare. Pike studied her like a snake studying a mouse. You're new here, so I'll explain how things work. I own the water rights. I own most of the buildings. And I own the law. Cross me, and you'll find yourself on the next stage out if you're lucky. I'll take my chances. Will you? Pike nodded to his men. Boys, help Mrs. Ramirez to her feet. As Johnson reached for the Mexican woman, Cole moved. His hand closed on the man's wrist, stopping him cold. The lady doctor said no. Johnson tried to jerk free, reaching for his gun with his other hand. Cole's fist connected with his jaw, sending him sprawling. Reeves went for his weapon, but froze when he found himself looking down the barrel of Cole's Colt. Everybody stay calm, Cole said quietly. Pike's face had gone very still. You just assaulted a deputy sheriff, Running Fox. I stopped a man from interfering with a medical procedure. Cole kept his gun steady. Sheriff Briggs might be interested to know his deputies are preventing sick children from receiving treatment. Sheriff Briggs does what I tell him. Maybe, but there are enough witnesses here to make things complicated. Cole glanced around the room. Mrs. Martinez, you saw Deputy Johnson lay hands on a woman whose child is dying. Pete Williams. You saw it too, Reverend Abel. I saw it, the Reverend said firmly from the doorway. Clear as day. Pike's jaw tightened. He wasn't used to open defiance. This isn't over, he said softly. Dr. Hart, you've made a poor choice of allies. And you, Running Fox, you've been living on borrowed time since you came back. That time just ran out. He turned and walked out, his men scrambling after him. Johnson shot Cole a look that promised retribution before following his boss. The room let out a collective breath. Doctor. Hart immediately returned to her patient, but her hands trembled slightly as she measured medicine into a spoon. That was foolish, she said without looking at Cole. I could have handled it. By giving him your medical supplies, then what would you treat people with? I would have figured something out. Pike doesn't negotiate. Doctor, he takes... Cole holstered his gun. How's the boy? Her expression softened slightly. The fever's breaking. If we can keep it down through the day, he should recover. She looked at Mrs. Ramirez. "He'll need plenty of water. Clean water." The woman's face crumpled. "But the water, Mr. Pike charges." "I'll handle it." Cole said. He'd seen too many children die from bad water. "There's a spring I know, 2 miles north. I'll bring back what you need." "Doctor," Hart looked at him sharply, "why would you risk that Pike just threatened you?" "Pike's been threatening me since I came back. As for why," he shrugged. "Maybe I'm tired of watching children die for the sake of a few dollars." He left before she could respond. Outside, the morning sun was already brutal. The crowd had dispersed, but Cole noticed several of Pike's men lounging near the saloon, watching. Word would be all over town within the hour the half-breed and the lady doctor had stood up to Luther Pike. It was a death sentence, most likely, but as Cole headed for his horse, he found he didn't much care. He'd been dead inside since the massacre at Rabbit Creek. Maybe it was time his body caught up. The spring was where he'd left it, hidden in a box canyon, protected by old Apache taboos that kept most folks away. Cole filled every water container he'd brought, then made the careful journey back. He was half expecting an ambush, but Pike's men were nowhere to be seen. That worried him more than an attack would have. He found Dr. Hart still at the clinic, now treating a dozen patients. She'd shed her jacket and rolled up her sleeves, revealing forearms marked with old scars burns. From the look of them, she worked with an efficiency that spoke of years of practice, moving from patient to patient with steady grace. "The water," he said, setting the containers down. She glanced up, and he saw surprise flicker across her face. "You actually went?" "Said I would. Most men who make promises to me don't keep them." The words slipped out, and she immediately looked away. "That is thank you." Cole helped distribute the water. Watching her work, she had a way with people, especially the children. Her Spanish was passable, her manner gentle but assured. When she examined a nasty cut on a young Apache boy's leg, she didn't flinch at the suspicious looks from his grandmother. "This needs suturing," she told the old woman in careful Spanish. "May I?" The grandmother studied her for a long moment, then nodded. As doctor, Hart worked. She hummed softly a tune Cole recognized as an old hymn his mother used to sing. "You have medical experience with native peoples," he observed when the boy had been bandaged and sent on his way. "In Chicago, I worked at a clinic near the stockyards. We saw everyone Irish, Polish, Chinese, whoever needed help." She washed her hands in precious water. "Healing doesn't care about the color of your skin or the language you speak. Pike does. Pike cares about money and power. Everything else is just a tool to get them." She dried her hands, studying him. "You're part Apache." It wasn't a question, but Cole nodded. "My mother was Chiricahua. My father was a cavalry officer who decided he loved her more than his career." "That must have been difficult, being caught between two worlds." It was. He was surprised by his own honesty. Something about her direct gaze made subterfuge seem pointless. "Still is. Yet you came back here. Why?" Cole looked out the window at the dusty street, the withering town. "Maybe because I got tired of running from what I am. Maybe because—" He trailed off. Because I owe a debt to the people who died because of me." She tilted her head. "Rabbit Creek." His jaw tightened. Everyone knew about Rabbit Creek, the massacre that had ended the Apache wars in this region. What they didn't know was the role a young scout named Cole Running Fox had played in it. "I should go," he said. "Wait." She moved to her medical bag, pulled out a photograph. "I took this yesterday at the Henderson Ranch. Look at it." The image was remarkably clear new photographic techniques, Cole supposed. It showed the crowd at the funeral, faces etched in grief and anger. But Dr. Hart pointed to a figure on the edge, barely visible. "There," she said, "on the roof of the barn. Do you see?" Cole squinted. There was definitely something a shape that didn't belong. Could be anyone. Could be. She produced a magnifying glass. But look closer. See the rifle barrel, and there that looks like a deputy's badge catching the light. His blood went cold. Johnson or Reeves? I can't tell, but whoever it is, they were watching the funeral very carefully. Almost like... She paused. Like they were making sure their work was properly appreciated. Cole stared at the photograph. Evidence. Actual evidence that one of Pike's deputies had been surveilling the funeral, possibly the same man who'd shot Tom Henderson. This is dangerous, he said. If Pike finds out you have this, then we'd better make sure he doesn't find out. She tucked the photograph back into her bag. You said you'd take me to where you found the body. Does that offer still stand? After what happened this morning, Pike will have men watching us both. Then we'll have to be careful. Her jaw set stubbornly. Mr. Running Fox. Cole, that boy's mother, looked me in the eyes and asked me who killed her son. I couldn't answer, but maybe, with your help, I can find something that will... Cole studied her. Morning light through the window caught the determination in her eyes, the firm set of her mouth. She was going to pursue this with or without him. And without him, she'd likely end up as dead as Tom Henderson. Dawn, he said finally. Be ready to ride at dawn. Bring water, food for a day, and that camera of yours. Wear something that won't stand out against the rocks. I'll be ready. As he turned to leave, she called after him. Cole, why are you helping me? He paused at the door. Maybe because I'm tired of Pike deciding who lives and who dies. Maybe because... He looked back at her. Maybe because you're the first person in a long time to look at me and see something more than a half-breed scout with blood on his hands. What do I see? A man trying to find his way home. He left before she could respond, stepping out into the blazing heat. The street was quiet, but Cole could feel eyes watching from windows and doorways. By now, Pike would know about the photograph. He'd know the lady doctor and the half-breed were working together. The smart thing would be to ride out now, leave Red Rock and its troubles behind. But as Cole headed for the livery stable, he realized he was done being smart, done running. Tomorrow, he and Dr. Hart would ride out to Coyote Ridge. They'd look for evidence, for truth, for justice in a land that had precious little of any of those things. And Luther Pike would be waiting. The salt road stretched before them like a pale scar across the desert, wavering in the heat mirages that rose from the baked earth. Cole rode slightly ahead, his eyes constantly scanning the horizon while Dr. Hart kept pace on the sturdy mare he'd selected for her from the livery. It had been 3 days since their confrontation with Pike, and the town's water situation had grown desperate. Tell me again why hauling salt is worth risking our necks, Doctor, Hart asked, adjusting her hat against the brutal sun. Salt brings good money in the mining camps up north, Cole replied, checking their back trail for the dozenth time. Money the town needs if we're going to dig new wells. Pike controls the existing water, but he can't control what hasn't been found yet. She rode in silence for a moment. You think there's more water to find? My mother's people lived here for generations before the white men came. They knew every spring, every seep. He pointed to a line of cottonwoods in the distance. See those trees? They only grow where water runs close to the surface. The old ones marked these places, left signs for those who knew how to read them. The salt caravan consisted of 6 wagons, driven by men desperate enough to risk Pike's displeasure for the promise of fair wages. Miguel Vasquez led them, a tough old merchant who'd been running goods through Apache territory since before Cole was born. His sons, Carlos and Ramon, drove 2 of the wagons, while the others were handled by Jim Henderson, Tom's father, and 2 other ranchers Pike hadn't managed to run off yet. They made camp that night in a box canyon, wagons circled for protection. As the men tended the animals and set watches, Dr. Hart worked on Henderson's hands, which had been torn raw by the rains. You shouldn't be here, Henderson said quietly as she applied salve. Pike don't forgive, and he don't forget. Neither do I, she replied. Your son deserved better than a bullet in the back. Henderson's jaw tightened. Cole says you might have evidence, something that could prove who done it. Perhaps, but evidence means nothing without law to enforce it. Then what's the point? Doctor, Hart wrapped his hands carefully. The point, Mr. Henderson, is that truth has a way of spreading like water. It finds its way through the smallest cracks. And once enough people know the truth, they might find the courage to act on it. Cole finished, joining them by the fire. He'd been scouting the ridgeline, making sure they weren't being followed. Any sign of fever? Doctor, the men need to be healthy for what's coming. She understood his real question was anyone showing signs of the sickness that had been spreading through town since Pike cut water rations. Everyone's holding up so far, but if we don't get clean water soon... A coyote howled in the distance, answered by another. Cole tensed, then relaxed. Just coyotes, he said, but his hand stayed near his rifle. The next morning brought trouble in a different form. They were loading the wagons at the salt flats when riders appeared on the horizon, 6 of them, moving fast. Cole, Miguel called quietly. I see them. Cole checked his Winchester, then glanced at Dr. Hart. Stay with the wagons. Whatever happens, don't try to be a hero. She gave him a look that suggested she'd make her own decisions about heroism, but moved to where her medical bag was stored. Cole noticed she also checked the derringer he'd insisted she carry. The riders thundered up in a cloud of alkali dust. Johnson led them, his jaw still bruised from Cole's punch. With him were 5 of Pike's roughest men, all armed, all wearing deputy badges that meant nothing beyond Pike's reach. Well, Johnson said, resting his hand on his pistol. Look what we found. A bunch of thieves stealing from Mr. Pike's legal claim. This is public land, Miguel said calmly. The salt belongs to whoever works for it. Not anymore. Johnson produced a paper. Mister, Pike filed on this whole area yesterday. You're trespassing on private property. Cole knew the paper was worthless. Claims took weeks to process. Not days. But out here, with no one to dispute it, paper meant whatever the man with the most guns said it meant. We'll leave, Henderson said, his voice thick with suppressed rage. No need for trouble. Oh, but there is need. Johnson smiled. See, mister, Pike wants to make sure folks understand the consequences of defying him, so you're going to dump that salt right here, then pay a fine for trespassing, $100 per wagon. We don't have that kind of money. Carlos Vasquez protested. Then I guess we'll have to take it in trade. Johnson's eyes found Dr. Hart. The lady doctor there should fetch a pretty penny in the camps, unless she'd rather work off the debt personal-like. Cole moved his horse between Johnson and the wagons. Try it. You threatening a deputy, breed. I'm promising a certainty. You touch her, you die. The moment stretched taut as a fiddle string. Johnson's men spread out, hands hovering near weapons. Cole kept his eyes on Johnson, reading the man's body language, waiting for the tell that would signal violence. Then Dr. Hart spoke up. Deputy Johnson, may I ask you a medical question? The unexpected query threw him off balance. What? That bruise on your jaw. Has it been giving you headaches? Difficulty chewing? She climbed down from the wagon, moving with professional confidence. Untreated mandibular trauma can lead to serious complications. I don't need no doctoring from you. Perhaps not, but I'm curious about something else. She reached into her bag, and every man tensed, but she only pulled out her photograph from the funeral. Were you aware that modern photographic techniques can capture images at quite a distance? It's really quite fascinating. Johnson's eyes narrowed. What are you playing at? Nothing at all. I simply thought you might be interested to know that I've been documenting my journey. For scientific purposes. Of course, The territorial governor is quite interested in my work with disease prevention. I send him regular reports, along with photographs. Cole almost smiled. She was bluffing. The territorial governor probably didn't know she existed, but Johnson didn't know that. Mr. Pike won't be intimidated by evidence, Doctor. Hart's voice remained pleasant. By documentation that could be presented in a federal court, Mr. Pike is a businessman. I'm sure he understands the value of avoiding unnecessary legal complications. Johnson sat his horse, clearly out of his depth. He'd come expecting to bully frightened civilians, not face down an educated woman who spoke of federal courts and territorial governors. "This ain't over," he finally said. "You can take your salt this time, but don't think you've won anything. Mr. Pike has a long memory." "So do I, Doctor," Hart replied quietly. The deputies wheeled their horses and galloped off, leaving a dust cloud that hung in the still air like a threat. "That was dangerous," Cole said as the men returned to loading salt. "Everything in this territory is dangerous." She tucked the photograph away. "At least now they know we're not entirely helpless." They worked through the heat of the day, loading the wagons with the precious salt that would bring cash money to Red Rock's struggling families. Cole noticed Doctor. Hart didn't just watch, she helped, her hands soon as white with salt dust as everyone else's. That evening, as they made camp in a different canyon, Cole found himself sitting beside her as she wrote in her journal by firelight. "What are you documenting?" he asked. "Everything. The water situation, the medical conditions I'm seeing, the way Pike uses debt and violence to control the town." She looked up. "Someone should bear witness." "Witnesses have a way of disappearing out here." "Then I'll have to be careful not to disappear." She returned to her writing. "Tell me about your mother's people, the water signs you mentioned." Cole was quiet for a long moment. He rarely spoke of his mother or her people, but something about the firelight and her patient attention made the words come. "The Chiricahua knew every water source for 100 miles. They had to water meant survival. My mother taught me the signs when I was young, how certain plants only grow near hidden springs, how the flight patterns of birds can lead you to water, how to read the rock formations that trap rainfall." "And you think there's water near Red Rock that Pike doesn't know about?" "I know there is, but finding it and developing it are two different things. Takes money, equipment, cooperation." He poked at the fire with a stick. "Things Pike makes sure people don't have." "What if they did? What if the town worked together?" "You're dreaming. Doctor, fear keeps people apart out here." "Fear, yes, but also hope." She closed her journal. "I've seen it in other places. When people get desperate enough, when they find something worth fighting for together, fear stops being enough to control them." A wolf howled in the distance. Not a coyote this time, but a true wolf. Rare in these parts. The sound raised the hair on Cole's neck. Some ancestral memory of danger. "We should double the watch tonight," he said. "You think Johnson will come back?" "Not tonight, but Pike's got other ways of sending messages." As if in answer to his words, Miguel called out from the edge of camp. "Cole, you need to see this." They found him standing by a flat rock near the canyon entrance. Pinned to it with a knife was a piece of paper. Cole read it by matchlight, his face hardening. "What is it, Doctor?" Hart asked. He handed her the paper. Written in a crude hand were the words, "The breed and the doctor, noon tomorrow. Coyote Ridge. Come alone or the Mexicans' boys die." "It's a trap," Miguel said, his face grim. "They took Carlos and Ramon when they went to check the horses." "Doctor," Hart's hand went to her mouth. "Those boys are barely 16. Old enough to die in Pike's world," Cole said. He studied the note again. "Coyote Ridge, where Tom Henderson was killed." "You can't go," Miguel said. "It's certain death." "Can't not go." Cole looked at Doctor. "Hart. Though you should stay. This is my fight." "No," she said firmly. "The note says both of us. If I don't come, they might hurt those boys. Besides, her jaw set in that stubborn way he was beginning to recognize. I'm tired of Pike thinking he can control us through fear. Cole wanted to argue, but he knew that look. Then we'd better get some sleep. Tomorrow's going to be a long day. As the camp settled for the night, Cole stood watch, staring out at the darkness. Somewhere out there, Pike's men had 2 innocent boys. Somewhere out there, a trap waited at Coyote Ridge. He thought about Doctor Hart's words about people finding something worth fighting for together. Maybe she was right. Maybe fear only worked until something stronger came along. The wolf howled again. Closer this time. Cole checked his rifle and settled in for a long night. Tomorrow, one way or another, things would change in Red Rock. He just hoped they'd live to see what came after. The ancient water sign was carved into the red rock face, barely visible unless you knew where to look. Cole traced the spiral pattern with his finger, feeling the grooves his ancestors had cut generations ago. Doctor? Hart watched intently, her notebook out, sketching the symbol by the light of dawn. This marks a hidden spring, she asked. Not just any spring, a sacred one. My grandmother called it the heart water. It runs deep, fed by an underground river. Cole stepped back, studying the canyon walls. The entrance is concealed. Pike's men have ridden past here 100 times and never seen it. They'd survived the trap at Coyote Ridge 2 days ago, barely. Pike's men had indeed been waiting, but Cole had anticipated the ambush. With Miguel's help, they'd flanked the outlaws and freed the Vasquez boys without bloodshed, though Johnson had escaped with a bullet graze and a promise of vengeance. Now they were pursuing a different strategy. If Pike controlled the existing water, they'd find new sources. How do we access it, Doctor? Hart ran her hand along the rock face. Cole showed her the hidden handholds, the narrow passage that looked like nothing more than a crack in the stone. It's a tight squeeze, and dark. The passage runs 30 feet before it opens into the chamber. She nodded, already removing her medical bag to make herself smaller. I've been in tighter places, the sewers under Chicago, tracking a typhoid outbreak. They squeezed through the passage, Cole leading with a torch. The temperature dropped 20 degrees as they descended, the air growing moist and sweet. Then the passage opened. And Doctor, Hart gasped. The chamber was magnificent. Water cascaded from an opening high above, filling a natural basin carved from solid rock. Ancient paintings covered the walls, spirals, handprints, images of water and life. The pool was crystal clear, so pure it seemed to glow in the torchlight. My God, she breathed. There must be thousands of gallons here. Tens of thousands, and it refills constantly. Cole knelt by the pool, cupping water in his hands. The Apache believe this water has healing properties. They would bring their sick here, their wounded. Doctor, Hart was already testing the water with strips from her bag. The purity is remarkable. No contamination, perfect mineral balance. She looked up at him. This could save the town. If we can get to it. The passage is too narrow for regular water hauling. We'd need to widen it, or find another way in. What about from above? She studied the ceiling where the water entered. If this is fed by an underground river, there might be other access points. Cole considered this. Maybe, but it would take time to explore. And Pike burned down the Ramirez family's house last night. She interrupted quietly. Mrs. Ramirez and her children are staying at the church now. He's escalating. Cole's jaw tightened. He'd heard about the fire. Pike's message was clear: those who defied him would lose everything. There's something else. Doctor, Hart continued, I've been developing the photographs I took, not just from the funeral, but around town. I caught something interesting near Pike's warehouse. She pulled out a photograph, holding it up to the torchlight. Cole squinted at the image: Pike's men loading boxes under cover of darkness. Those aren't normal supplies, he said. The shape is wrong for goods or equipment. I think they're weapons, military grade, from the marking on one crate. Pike's not just controlling water, he's preparing for war. They made their way back through the passage, emerging into blazing daylight. As they prepared to return to town, Cole noticed fresh horse tracks near their hidden mounts. "We were followed," he said quietly. "Doctor," Hart checked her derringer. "Pike's men—" "No, these tracks are unshod. Apache." He studied the signs. One rider, moving carefully. "They watched us enter and leave, but didn't interfere." "Why would Apache be watching us?" Cole was quiet for a moment. "Maybe because word travels, a half-breed and a white doctor looking for water, standing against Pike. Some might see that as interesting." They rode back toward Red Rock by a circuitous route, avoiding the main trails. As they crested a rise, the town spread below them, looking smaller and more fragile than ever under the harsh sun. "I've been thinking, Doctor," Hart said, "about Pike's weapons, the water situation, everything. He's not just trying to control Red Rock. He's preparing for something bigger. The railroad." Cole agreed. "When it comes through next year, this land will be worth 10 times what it is now. If Pike controls the water—" "He controls everything. The railroad will have to deal with him, pay his prices." She frowned. "But there's more. I found correspondence in his trash, yes. I've been investigating. Letters mentioning federal contracts, military supplies. I think Pike has connections in Washington. People who want to see this territory developed a certain way." They were interrupted by the sound of gunfire from the town. Not the single shots of a dispute, but sustained firing. Cole spurred his horse forward. "Doctor," Hart close behind. They found chaos in the streets. Pike's men were dragging families from their homes, claiming back taxes and water debts. Anyone who resisted was beaten down. In front of the church, Reverend Abel stood firm, protecting the refugees who'd sought sanctuary. "This is a house of God," the Reverend declared. "You have no authority here." Johnson laughed. "God don't pay water bills. Preacher." "Cole and Doctor." Hart dismounted at the edge of the confrontation. She immediately moved toward the injured, but Pike's men blocked her path. Well, the breed and the doctor returned from their little adventure. Luther Pike himself emerged from the saloon, immaculate despite the chaos. "Find any water out there. Not that it matters. As of today, I own all water rights within 50 miles of Red Rock. Federal marshals confirmed it this morning." "Federal marshals you bought," Cole said. "Prove it." Pike's smile was cold. "But that's not why we're here. You see, there's been another theft. Someone broke into my warehouse last night, stole valuable property. We're searching for the culprits." "You mean you're terrorizing innocent people?" "Doctor," Hart said. "I mean, I'm protecting my interests. And speaking of interests—" Pike nodded to his men. "Doctor, Hart is under arrest for theft and conspiracy. Take her." Cole's hand went to his gun, but found himself surrounded by drawn weapons. "Ah," Pike warned. "You're fast, running fox, but not fast enough to beat 12 guns. Stand down, or we'll have a massacre right here in the street." "Doctor," Hart stepped forward before Cole could act. "It's all right," she said calmly. "I'll come peacefully. But first, let me tend to the wounded." "The wounded can rot," Johnson snarled. "Then you'll have deaths on your hands. In front of witnesses. Federal investigation tends to follow mass casualties. Even bought marshals can't ignore that." Pike considered, then nodded curtly. 5 minutes. Then you come quietly." "Doctor." Hart moved among the injured with swift efficiency, pressing bandages into the hands of those who could help, giving rapid instructions. As she worked, she passed close to Cole. "The photographs," she murmured. "Hidden in my medical bag. False bottom. Get them to someone who can use them. The territorial attorney in Prescott, James Morrison. He's honest. Eva, promise me. He nodded slightly. She finished her work and stood, smoothing her skirts. I'm ready. As Pike's men led her away, Cole felt something cold settle in his chest, the same feeling he'd had before Rabbit Creek, when he'd known violence was coming but couldn't stop it. But this time was different. This time, he wasn't alone. This ain't right, someone muttered in the crowd. It was Jim Henderson, Tom's father. She ain't done nothing but help folks. Pike's gone too far. Another voice agreed. First the water, then burning houses, now arresting the dock. Reverend Abel stepped forward. Friends, I believe it's time we remembered that we are many, and they are few. That righteousness is stronger than wickedness. That together we are mightier than any tyrant. Fine words, preacher, Johnson sneered. But we got the guns, and we have something more powerful, the Reverend replied. We have the truth, and the truth. Deputy Johnson has a way of setting people free. Cole watched the crowd. Something was shifting, like the moment before a thunderstorm when the air goes electric. Pike felt it too, his expression hardened. Disperse, he ordered. Anyone still on the street in 2 minutes will be arrested for sedition. The crowd began to scatter, but slowly, reluctantly. People met each other's eyes, silent communication passing between them. Cole caught Miguel Vasquez's gaze, saw the older man nod slightly. As the street cleared, Cole retrieved Dr. Hart's medical bag. His fingers found the false bottom, the precious photographs hidden within. Evidence, truth, maybe enough to bring outside attention to Red Rock's plight. But first, he had to get her out of Pike's jail, and for that, he'd need help. That night, Cole met with a gathering that would have surprised Luther Pike in the hidden cellar beneath the church. Ranchers, merchants, Mexican laborers, even some of the saloon girls, all united by desperation and a growing anger. We get the dock out, Cole said simply. Then we take back our town. How? Jim Henderson asked. Pike's got 30 guns, maybe more. We have something he doesn't expect, Miguel said. We have each other, and we have friends he doesn't know about. Cole understood. The Apache who'd watched them at the spring, the surrounding tribes who'd suffered under Pike's expansion, enemies of enemies, potentially allies. It's dangerous, Reverend Abel warned. People will die. People are dying now, Mabel Quinn from the saloon said flatly. Just slowly, from thirst and despair. I say we fight. Agreement rippled through the room. Cole felt that cold sensation again, but underneath it, something else. Hope, maybe, or just the relief of finally choosing to stand instead of kneel. Tomorrow night, he said, we move at sunset. Everyone spread the word. Quiet-like. And remember, we're not just fighting for water. We're fighting for the right to live free. As the meeting broke up, Cole stepped outside into the cool night air. Somewhere in Pike's jail, Dr. Hart was locked up for the crime of helping people. Tomorrow, that would change. Tomorrow, Red Rock would find out what happened when the many stopped fearing the few. The stars above were bright and distant, unmoved by human struggles. But Cole thought he saw something in their pattern, the same spiral his ancestors had carved into rock, marking the presence of life-giving water. Soon, that water would flow free again. He'd make sure of it, or die trying. The rescue had gone wrong from the start. Pike had anticipated their move, reinforced the jail with extra men. In the chaos of gunfire and shouting, Cole had managed to get Dr. Hart out, but not without cost. Johnson's bullet had caught him in the shoulder, a burning line of fire that sent him stumbling. Now they ran through the darkened canyons. Dr. Hart supporting him as blood seeped through his fingers. Behind them, the sound of pursuit echoed off the rocks' horses. Dogs, angry men with torches. This way. Cole gasped, guiding them toward a narrow cleft in the rock. He knew these canyons like his own heartbeat. every twist and turn mapped in memory. The passage led upward, toward the hidden falls he discovered as a boy. His mother had brought him here once, speaking of it as a sacred place where warriors came to cleanse themselves of battle's stain. He'd never thought he'd need it for its literal purpose. "You're losing too much blood, Doctor," Hart said as they paused in a small cave. She tried to examine the wound by feel in the darkness. "Keep moving," he insisted. "They'll find us if we stop." She didn't argue, but he felt her worry in the way she gripped his good arm, steadying him over the rough ground. The sound of water grew louder. They were close. When they emerged onto the ledge beside the waterfall, moonlight turned the cascade into a ribbon of silver. The pool below was dark as ink, surrounded by smooth stones worn by centuries of flow. "We can defend this position," Cole said, leaning heavily against a boulder. "Narrow approach, good sight lines." His legs gave out. "Doctor," Hart caught him, easing him down. "Let me look at that wound properly." "No time. They're coming." "Then they'll find us regardless. Hold still." She worked quickly, tearing strips from her petticoat for bandages. The bullet had passed through, which was good, but the blood loss was significant. Cole's vision swam as she tied off the dressing. "You need water," she said, "and rest. What I need is to keep you safe." He struggled to focus. "Eve, if they take us, Pike won't let you live. You know too much." "Then we'd better not let them take us." She helped him to the pool's edge. "Drink." The water was ice cold, shocking him back to clarity. As he drank, she reloaded his pistol and checked her derringer, movement steady despite everything. "I've been thinking," she said quietly, "about what you said the Apache watching us. Do you think they'd help?" "Maybe, if we could reach them, but the signal fires are miles away, and—" Torchlight flickered below. Voices carried up the canyon walls. Pike's men had found their trail. Cole forced himself to stand, checking his rifle. 3 bullets left, plus what was in his Colt. Not enough for the dozen men he could hear approaching. "Get behind those rocks," he ordered. "If they get past me—" "They won't." She stood beside him, derringer in hand. "We face this together." He wanted to argue, to make her hide, but there was no time. The first of Pike's men appeared on the trail below, Johnson leading them with his arm in a sling from their earlier encounter. "Running Fox," Johnson called. "Send out the woman and we might let you die quick." Cole's response was a rifle shot that sent Johnson diving for cover. It sparked a fusillade of return fire, bullets whining off the rocks around them. "Save your ammunition," Pike's voice carried from below. "Surround them. They're not going anywhere." Cole and Eve crouched behind their boulder barricade. In the moonlight, he could see men spreading out, taking positions that would allow them to fire from multiple angles. Soon, their cover would be worthless. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I should have gotten you somewhere safe." "You did." She met his eyes. "Here, with you, this is where I choose to be." Something in her gaze made his throat tight. He'd been alone so long, carried his guilt and isolation like armor. But she saw through it all, saw him not the half-breed scout or the failed warrior, but simply Cole. More gunfire erupted. Cole returned it sparingly, making each shot count. One of Pike's men cried out, tumbling back down the trail, but there were too many, and his ammunition was almost gone. Then, from the canyon rim above, came a sound that froze everyone, an Apache war cry, high and ululating. Arrows whispered through the air, finding targets with deadly precision. Pike's men scattered in panic as more cries echoed from all directions. "Apaches!" someone screamed. "We're surrounded!" It wasn't a large war party, maybe 6 or 7 warriors, but in the darkness, with their knowledge of the terrain, they seemed like an army. Cole recognized the tactics, the way they used fear as much as arrows to rout their enemies. In minutes, Pike's men were in full retreat, Johnson screaming at them to hold formation even as he ran. The shooting stopped, replaced by the sound of horses galloping away. A figure appeared on the ledge above the waterfall, an Apache warrior in traditional dress, face painted for war. Cole recognized him despite the year's Robert Crow Dog, his cousin from his mother's side. "You make much noise, cousin," Crow Dog said in Apache. "We heard the shooting from our camp." "Your timing is appreciated," Cole replied in the same language. Crow Dog studied Dr. Hart with interest. "This is the medicine woman who defies the water thief." "She is. Then she is under our protection, as are you, despite your mixed blood." Crow Dog's expression softened slightly. "Your mother would be proud. You fight for the people again." Other warriors materialized from the shadows. Young men Cole didn't recognize. One of them spoke rapidly to Crow Dog, who nodded. "The water thief's men flee toward town. They will return with more guns, more men. You cannot stay here." "We won't run." "Doctor," Hart said, surprising everyone by speaking in halting Apache. "The town needs us." Crow Dog smiled slightly. "You learn our language?" "A little, from medical texts, and from Cole." She stood straighter despite her exhaustion. "Will you help us? Not just tonight, but in the fight to come. The enemy of our enemy," Crow Dog said thoughtfully. "Pike has poisoned waterholes, driven game from sacred grounds. Perhaps it is time we reminded him this land has older laws than his papers." They spoke quickly, making plans. The Apache would harass Pike's outlying operations, cut his supply lines, make it costly for him to maintain control. Meanwhile, Cole and Dr. Hart would return to rally the townspeople. "But first," Crow Dog said, looking at Cole's bloodied shoulder, "you must heal, the old way." Before Cole could protest, the warriors were helping him toward the waterfall. The cold mountain water hit him like a physical blow, driving the breath from his lungs. But as he stood there, letting it wash over him, he felt something shift inside, not just the cleansing of his wound, but something deeper. When he emerged, Dr. Hart was there with a blanket. "Your cousin told me this was necessary," she said, something about washing away the past to face the future. Cole nodded, teeth chattering. "Old traditions. I never thought—" He stopped, seeing how she was looking at him, not with the clinical gaze of a doctor, but something warmer, more personal. "What?" he asked. Instead of answering, she stepped forward and wrapped her arms around him, blanket and all. "You brave, stubborn fool," she whispered. "When I saw you take that bullet." He held her carefully, mindful of his shoulder. "Takes more than one bullet to stop me." "Good." She pulled back to look at him. "Because we have work to do." Crow Dog and his warriors escorted them to a hidden camp where Cole's wound was properly treated with traditional medicines that Dr. Hart watched with professional interest. By dawn, they were ready to move. "The water thief will be angry," Crow Dog warned as they prepared to part ways. "He will lash out like a wounded bear." "Then we'd better be ready," Cole said. They made their way back toward Red Rock as the sun climbed higher. Cole's shoulder ached, but the herbs had reduced the inflammation, and Dr. Hart's careful stitching would minimize scarring. As they crested the final ridge before town, they saw smoke rising from multiple buildings. "He's burning out anyone who might have helped us," Dr. Hart said grimly. "Then we stop him?" "Today." She looked at him. "You have a plan?" "The beginning of one. Pike's stretched thin now, men out searching for us, others trying to control the town, and he doesn't know about the alliance with the Apache." Cole managed a tight smile. "Time to show him what happens when he pushes people too far." They rode down toward the burning town, no longer running or hiding. Behind them, invisible in the rocks, Apache scouts watched and waited. The battle for Red Rock was about to begin in earnest. But first, Cole thought, looking at the woman beside him, brave, brilliant. Unbreaking, first they would save what could be saved, and then they would build something new from the ashes. The waterfall's blessing still clung to him like a cool memory in the rising heat. He'd stood naked before the water and emerged cleansed, ready, and she had walked straight into his arms, choosing him, choosing this fight, choosing hope over fear. Together, they rode toward the smoke and chaos, toward justice delayed but not denied. The water would flow free again. He'd promised her that, and Cole Running Fox kept his promises, even if it killed him. The makeshift darkroom doctor Hart had created in the church cellar was stifling, lit only by a red-tinted lantern. Cole watched as she carefully developed the crucial photograph, the chemical smell sharp in the confined space. Around them, the town's rebels waited 30 souls who decided they'd rather die on their feet than live on their knees. "There," she whispered as the image materialized in the developing solution. "Look at the courthouse roof." Cole leaned closer. The photograph from the Henderson funeral showed it clear as day. Deputy Johnson crouched behind the courthouse chimney, rifle in hand. But more damning was what the enhanced image revealed: Luther Pike himself standing in the doorway below, watching. He was there. Jim Henderson breathed, looking over their shoulders. "Pike watched while his man lined up the shot on my boy. This proves they were working together." "Doctor," Hart said, carefully moving the photograph to the fixing solution. With this and the other evidence, a commotion outside interrupted her. Miguel Vasquez burst through the cellar door. "They're coming! Pike's bringing his whole crew, must be 40 men." Cole checked his weapons. His shoulder still ached from yesterday's bullet wound, but the Apache medicines and Dr. Hart's care had worked wonders. "How long?" 20 minutes, maybe less. They're gathering in the square. Reverend Abel stepped forward. "Then it's time. If we're to make our stand, let it be in daylight, where all can see." The plan was simple because it had to be. They couldn't match Pike's firepower, but they had something else: truth, desperation, and the promise of Apache allies waiting in the wings. "Remember," Cole addressed the group, "we're not trying to win a war. We're trying to create enough doubt, enough chaos, that Pike's men start questioning whether his money is worth dying for." They filed out of the church into blazing noon sunlight. The square was already filling with Pike's gunmen, Johnson at their head, his wounded arm strapped to his chest. At the center sat Luther Pike himself, mounted on a white stallion, dressed like a frontier emperor. "Good people of Red Rock," Pike's voice carried across the square, "I've been patient. I've been reasonable. But harboring fugitives, destroying property, conspiring with savage Indians, these are acts of insurrection." Cole and Dr. Hart emerged from the crowd, walking calmly toward the center of the square. Behind them, the townspeople spread out, not many, but more than Pike had expected. Men and women who'd found their courage at last. "Luther Pike." "Doctor," Hart called out, her voice clear and strong, "I charge you with murder, conspiracy, and crimes against the people of this town." Pike laughed. "You charge me you're nothing but a meddling woman who doesn't know her place. And you?" He looked at Cole. "A half-breed cur who should have been put down years ago." "Maybe," Cole said. "But we have something you don't. Proof." He held up the photograph, and murmurs ran through Pike's men. Some of them hadn't known about Tom Henderson's murder. They'd been told the boy was killed by Apache raiders. "That proves nothing," Johnson shouted, but his voice cracked slightly. "It proves you were on the courthouse roof with a rifle while Tom Henderson was killed." "Doctor," Hart said, "it proves Mr. Pike was there, watching. And I have more documents showing illegal water rights claims, forged federal papers, evidence of weapon smuggling." "Lies." Pike's face was turning red. "Seize them!" But his men hesitated. In that moment of uncertainty, Mabel Quinn stepped forward from the crowd. "I seen things too," she announced. "Working in the saloon. You hear talk?" Like how Johnson bragged about that long shot the night Tom died. And I've seen the doctored books, added Samuel Chen, the Chinese merchant. Pike charges us triple for water, keeps 2 sets of records. More voices joined in, people testifying to what they'd seen, what they'd suffered. Pike's men shifted uneasily. They'd signed on to intimidate scattered ranchers, not face down an entire town. Enough, Pike roared. Johnson, if these people won't disperse, make them. Johnson reached for his gun with his good hand, but Cole was faster. The shot was precise, sending Johnson's weapon spinning into the dirt. Johnson clutched his hand, cursing. Nobody else needs to die today, Cole announced. Any man who walks away now, no grudges held. You were just earning wages, but stay, and you're choosing to stand with a murderer. 5 of Pike's men immediately lowered their weapons and backed away. Then 3 more. The odds were shifting. That's when they heard it. Apache war cries from the ridges surrounding town. Crow Dog and his warriors appeared on the heights, bows visible, a reminder that Pike's forces were exposed on multiple fronts. Apaches! Someone screamed. Just watching, Cole called out. Long as nobody starts shooting at townfolk. Pike's face had gone from red to purple. You brought savages to a civilized town. You brought murder to a civilized town. Doctor, Hart countered. You poisoned wells, burned homes, killed a boy whose only crime was trying to make an honest living. You want to talk about poison? Reverend Abel stepped forward, holding a jar of murky water. This came from the well you forced the Mexican families to use. 3 children dead from typhoid this month alone. The crowd's anger was building now. Held in check only by Cole's raised hand, Pike must have sensed the shift his empire built on fear was crumbling as that fear turned to rage. I own this town, he declared. The water, the land, the law. You own nothing, Sheriff Briggs interrupted, stepping out of the crowd. Everyone turned in surprise. Briggs had been Pike's man, bought and paid for, but the sheriff's face was grim with resolve. Luther Pike, I'm placing you under arrest for murder, conspiracy, and about a dozen other crimes I'll sort out later. You can't arrest me, I made you, and now I'm unmaking myself from what you made me. Briggs looked older, tireder, but somehow cleaner. Doctor, Hart showed me evidence I couldn't ignore anymore. That boy's blood is on all our hands if we let this continue. Pike went for his gun. Several things happened at once. Cole's rifle came up. Doctor, Hart shouted a warning. Briggs dove aside, and from somewhere in the crowd, a single shot rang out. Pike jerked in his saddle, looking down in shock at the spreading red stain on his white shirt. Behind him, Jim Henderson lowered a smoking rifle, his face carved from stone. For Tom, Henderson said simply. Pike toppled from his horse, landing hard in the dust. Doctor! Hart rushed forward, her medical instincts overcoming everything else, but even as she knelt beside him, she could see it was too late. The shot had been true. You... Pike gasped, looking up at her with dimming eyes. You ruined everything. No, she said quietly. You ruined everything. I just helped people see it. Luther Pike died there in the square. Under the blazing sun he'd used as a weapon against his own people. His remaining men threw down their weapons, suddenly eager to distance themselves from their dead employer. As Doctor, Hart stood. Cole noticed her hands were trembling not from fear, but from the release of tension that had been building for weeks. He moved to her side, steady and solid. It's over, he said. Is it? She looked around at the crowd, some cheering, some weeping, all changed by what they'd witnessed. Pike's dead, but the problems remain. The water shortage, the debts, the damaged wells. Then we fixed them, together. Sheriff Briggs had taken charge, directing men to round up Pike's former employees. Johnson, you're under arrest for the murder of Tom Henderson. The rest of you will sort out who was following orders and who was enjoying the cruelty." Johnson, cradling his wounded hand, spat at the ground. "You think you've won, Pikehead partners? Investors back east. They won't let this stand." "Then we'll deal with them too," Cole said. "But for now, Red Rock is free." The Apache warriors on the ridges raised their bows in salute, then melted back into the landscape. Their part was done. They'd shown that Pike's reign wasn't inevitable, that resistance was possible. As the square began to clear, Dr. Hart, documenting everything with her camera for the inevitable legal battles, Miguel Vasquez approached Cole. "The hidden spring you showed us, my sons and I, we can start widening that passage tomorrow, with proper tools and enough hands." "We'll have water flowing within a week," Cole finished. "Clean water, fairly distributed." "What about the existing wells, Doctor?" Hart asked, joining them. "The contaminated ones need to be cleaned or sealed. I'll organize work crews," Miguel promised. "This town knows how to work when there's hope of fair reward." As the sun began to sink toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold, Cole and Dr. Hart found themselves alone in the square where violence had given way to justice. "You did it," Cole said. "You gave them the courage to stand up." "We did it," she corrected. "All of us. Even poor Sheriff Briggs, finding his conscience at the end. What happens now with the town free? You could go anywhere. That job in Prescott." She turned to face him fully, her eyes warm despite the day's harsh events. "Cole running Fox, are you trying to get rid of me?" "Never. But you deserve better than a dusty frontier town and a broken-down scout." "I deserve," she said firmly, "exactly what I choose, and I choose to stay where I'm needed, where I can make a difference, where—" She paused, then continued more softly. "Where the man I care about is planning to dig wells and build a future." Cole felt something ease in his chest, a knot he hadn't realized was there. "It won't be easy. Pike's investors, the territorial government, the railroad, they'll all have opinions about what happened here. Then we'll face them. With truth. With unity. With the law on our side for once." She smiled, tired but genuinely happy. "Besides, someone needs to document it all. The first town in the territory to overthrow a water baron? That's a story worth telling." As they walked toward the church where the wounded were being tended, Cole thought about the cycles of his life, the violence at Rabbit Creek that had driven him away, the violence here that had brought him home, but this time the violence had served justice, had freed rather than destroyed. The ghosts of his past weren't gone, might never be entirely, but they no longer owned him. He had work to do, a town to help rebuild, a remarkable woman by his side who saw him clearly and chose to stay anyway. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight, Red Rock was free. Water would soon flow clean again, and hope, that rarest of frontier commodities, had taken root in the desert soil. The warrior had been cleansed. The doctor had found her purpose, and together, they would help this small corner of the world become what it should have been all along, a place where people could live free, drink clean water, and build something better than what came before. It was enough. It was everything. It was a beginning. The work of rebuilding began at dawn. Cole stood waist-deep in the contaminated well, passing up buckets of fouled water and debris to the chain of volunteers above. His shoulder protested the wound was only a week old, but there was too much to do for anyone to rest. "That's the last of the dead animals," he called up. "Someone passed down the lime. Dr. Hart appeared at the well's edge, her face smudged with dirt from organizing the medical supplies salvaged from Pike's warehouse. "Be careful with that lime. We need your hands intact." "Yes, ma'am," Cole replied with a slight smile, accepting the bucket of purifying powder. The town had transformed in the days since Pike's death. What had been a place of fear and suspicion was becoming something else, a community. The temporary council, led by Reverend Abel, had seized Pike's assets and distributed them according to need. Water flowed freely for the first time in months. "Cole," Miguel Vasquez called from across the square. "The passage to the hidden spring we've broken through." Cole climbed from the well, accepting a canteen of clean water from one of the workers. Across the square, he could see the fruit of their labor. A wider passage had been carved to the sacred spring, and even now, water was being hauled out in barrels for distribution. "The Apache won't mind, Doctor," Hart asked quietly, joining him. Crow Dog gave his blessing. He said the water was meant to give life, not to be hoarded. Cole watched as children who'd been rationed to cups now splashed in barrels, their laughter bright as the morning sun. My mother would have approved. Sheriff Briggs approached, looking older but more at peace than Cole had ever seen him. "Morning, folks. Thought you should know, just got word from Prescott. The territorial judge will be here next week to oversee Johnson's trial and sort out the legal mess Pike left behind." "What about Pike's investors, Doctor?" Hart asked. "That's the interesting part. Seems Mr. Pike wasn't entirely honest with his Eastern partners about his methods. When they learned about the murders and the water poisoning, they distanced themselves right quick. Bad for business, being associated with a tyrant. So they'll leave the town alone." Briggs shrugged. "For now, the railroad's still coming through next year, and there'll be new challenges, but we'll have legal water rights established by then, and a functioning town government." As the sheriff moved on, Cole noticed Dr. Hart watching the work crews with an odd expression. "What is it?" "That letter from Prescott," she said, "the one offering me the position at the railway hospital. I need to send a response." Cole's chest tightened, but he kept his voice neutral. "It's a good opportunity. Steady salary, modern facilities, respect." "Yes." She turned to face him. "All things I don't have here." The words hit like a physical blow, though he tried not to show it. "You should take it. You've done enough for Red Rock, more than enough." "Should I?" She stepped closer. "Tell me, Cole running Fox, what exactly do you think I should do?" He met her eyes, saw the challenge there. I think you should do what makes you happy." "And what if staying here makes me happy? What if building something from nothing, helping people who actually need me, working alongside a stubborn, half-Apache scout who's finally found his way home? What if that's worth more than a salary and modern facilities?" Hope flickered in his chest. "Eve?" "I posted my response this morning," she interrupted, thanking them for the offer but declining. "I'm needed here." She paused. "I'm wanted here. At least, I hope I am." Instead of answering with words, Cole did what he'd wanted to do for weeks. He kissed her, there in the middle of the square, in full view of the working townspeople. Someone whistled. Another cheered, and Mabel Quinn's voice carried across the square. "About damn time." When they separated, both were smiling. "I should get back to the well," Cole said. "And I should check on the Henderson family." "But Cole," she touched his face gently, "we should talk, properly, about the future." "Tonight," he promised. "After the work's done." The day passed in a blur of activity. Cole found himself at the Henderson ranch as the sun peaked, delivering water and supplies. Jim Henderson was working on repairing his fence, damaged during Pike's final desperate raids. "Cole," Henderson greeted him, straightening with effort. "Heard you and the doc are staying on." "Seems so." Henderson nodded slowly. "Good. Town needs people like you." Tom would have been glad to know his death led to something better. Cole helped unload the supplies in silence. As they worked, Henderson spoke again. "That knife you carry, the one with the wave pattern. Tom always admired it when he saw you in town." Cole touched the blade at his belt. His mother's knife. "It was my mother's. She said water always finds its way." "Mind if I hold it just for a moment?" Cole hesitated, then drew the knife and offered it handle first. Henderson took it reverently, studying the intricate patterns carved into the bone handle. Beautiful work. He handed it back. Tom would have wanted to thank you for bringing him home, for everything after. He was a good young man. He deserved justice. He got it in the end. Henderson looked out over his land, dry but no longer dying. We all did. As Cole rode back to town, he reflected on the changes not just in Red Rock, but in himself. The guilt over Rabbit Creek would never fully leave him, but it no longer defined him. He'd found a way to serve without violence, to protect without destroying. The sun was setting when he found Dr. Hart at her clinic, tending to her last patient of the day, one of the Apache children, brought by his grandmother for treatment of a persistent cough. "The medicine tastes bad," the boy complained in Apache. "Medicine often does." "Doctor," Hart replied in the same language, her pronunciation much improved. "But it will make you strong." After the grandmother and child left with thanks and a jar of honey to help with the medicine, Cole and Dr. Hart walked to the edge of town, where the desert stretched endlessly under the painted sky. "I've been thinking," she said, "about what comes next. The town has water, Pike's gone, justice is being served, but there's so much more to do." "Such as?" "A proper school. For one, the Mexican and Apache children have as much right to education as anyone. A real hospital, not just a converted shop, maybe even a library." She smiled at his expression. "I dream big." "It's a good dream." Cole picked up a smooth stone, running his thumb over its surface. "I've been thinking, too, about that ranch land south of here. Pike owned it, but it'll be sold off to pay his debts. Good land, if someone worked it right. Close enough to town to help with the building you're planning. Someone like you. Maybe, if I had a partner. Someone who knew about modern things like crop rotation and water management. That's very practical." She turned to face him fully. "Is that a proposal, Mr. Running Fox?" The Reverend Abel would probably prefer something more formal, Cole admitted. "But yes, if you'll have me scars, complicated heritage, and all." "Cole," she said softly, "the scars and heritage are part of who you are. They're part of what I love." The word hung between them, powerful as water in the desert. "I love you too," he said simply. "Have for a while now, though it took me time to admit it." "Men," she sighed with fond exasperation. "Always the last to recognize what's right in front of them." They stood together as stars began to appear in the darkening sky. In the distance, they could hear the sounds of the town laughter from the saloon. Children playing, the rhythmic sound of construction as people worked even into the evening. "There's something else," Dr. Hart said. "I've been in contact with my colleagues in Chicago. They're interested in my work here documenting the medical challenges of frontier life, the integration of traditional Apache medicine with modern techniques. They want to fund a study. More outsiders coming to Red Rock. Just observers. And the funding would help establish that hospital I mentioned." She hesitated. "If you're comfortable with it, I know you value privacy." "Privacy's overrated," Cole said. "If it helps the town, helps the people, then let them come. We've got nothing to hide anymore." A cool breeze swept across the desert, carrying the scent of sage and the promise of rain. The drought wasn't over. It might never be truly over in this hard land, but they'd found ways to survive it, even thrive despite it. "We should head back," Dr. Hart said. "I promised Mrs. Vasquez I'd check on her youngest before bed. And I need to meet with the well-digging crew about tomorrow's work." But neither moved, reluctant to break the moment. "Cole," she said, "we've come through so much violence, fear, loss. Do you think we can build something lasting here? Something good?" He thought of his mother's people, who'd survived in this desert for countless generations, of his father, who'd given up everything for love, of the town below, rising from the ashes of tyranny. Water carved these canyons, he said. Slow, patient, persistent. It took time, but it shaped the land into something beautiful. We can do the same. She took his hand, and together they walked back toward the lights of Red Rock. Tomorrow there would be more work wells to dig, wounds to heal, a future to build. The railroad would come, bringing new challenges and opportunities. There would be disputes over water rights, conflicts between old ways and new. The eternal struggle of a frontier town becoming something more. But tonight, they had each other, and a town full of people who'd learned to stand together. They had clean water and the promise of justice. They had hope, that most precious resource, flowing like a hidden spring in the desert. As they reached the first buildings, Mabel Quinn called out from the saloon, "Doc Cole, the boys are buying drinks for anyone who helped with the wells today. You two earned yourselves a whiskey or 3. "Thank you, Mabel." "Doctor," Hart called back, "but I need to see to my patients." "And I need to check the night watch," Cole added. Mabel shook her head. "All work and no play. At least tell me you've set a wedding date. This town needs something to celebrate." Cole and Doctor Hart exchanged glances. "Soon," Cole promised. "When the wells are finished and the trials are done." "I'll hold you to that," Mabel declared. "Red Rock deserves the biggest wedding this territory's ever seen." As they parted, Doctor Hart to her clinic, Cole to his rounds, both carried the warmth of possibility. They'd fought for this town, bled for it, nearly died for it. Now they had the harder task of living for it, of turning a place of fear into a home. But, as Cole had learned at the Waterfall, sometimes the hardest battles were the ones you fought within yourself. And sometimes, when you finally stopped running and let yourself be cleansed by truth and purpose and love, you found that home had been waiting for you all along. The stars wheeled overhead, eternal and patient. Below them, Red Rock prepared for another day of building, growing, becoming, and at the heart of it all, two people who had found each other in the midst of struggle now looked toward a future they would create together. Water in the desert, love after loss, hope after despair. It was more than enough. It was everything. The letter from Prescott arrived on a morning when the first green shoots were pushing through the red earth. Proof that water and hope could transform even the harshest ground, Doctor. Hart read it twice before finding Cole at the new well site, where he was teaching the Vasquez boys how to properly shore up the walls. "The railroad hospital," she said, holding up the letter. "They've increased their offer, double the salary, and they'll provide housing." Carlos and Ramon made excuses to leave. Sensing the private nature of the conversation, Cole set down his tools, wiping dusty hands on his pants. "That's generous." "It is." She folded the letter carefully. "They say they need someone with frontier experience, someone who's proven they can handle difficult conditions." "You've certainly proven that." She studied him, reading the careful neutrality in his voice. "You think I should consider it?" "I think you should have choices." He gestured at the half-finished well, the town beyond. "Red Rock is growing, but it's still just a frontier town. You could do important work in Prescott." "I'm doing important work here." She stepped closer. "Cole, are you trying to give me permission to leave? Because if you are..." "No." The word came out rougher than intended. "No. I'm trying to make sure you're choosing this us because you want it, not because you feel obligated." Her expression softened. "Oh, you dear, noble fool." She touched his face, leaving a smudge of dirt he didn't mind at all. "I chose this the day I walked into your arms at the Waterfall. I choose it every morning when I wake up to help build something meaningful. I choose you, Cole Running Fox, complicated past and all." He caught her hand, holding it against his cheek. "Then we'll write back together. Tell them the position's been filled permanently." "Actually," she said with a smile, "I have a better idea. What if we invited them to visit, show them what we're building here? They might fund a satellite clinic, Bring resources to Red Rock while I stay where I'm needed." "Where you're wanted," Cole corrected, pulling her close despite the public setting. "Where you're loved." The sound of approaching horses interrupted them. Sheriff Briggs rode up with two strangers, a man in a federal marshal's badge and a woman in traveling clothes who carried herself with unmistakable authority. "Cole, Doctor, Hart," Briggs called. "These folks are here about the water rights settlement. This is Marshal Townsend and Mrs. Catherine Morrison from the Territorial Water Commission." "Mrs.?" Morrison dismounted with practiced ease. "Doctor, Hart, Mr. Running Fox, I've read your reports with great interest. It seems Red Rock has become something of a model for water cooperation between different communities." "We've tried to be fair, Doctor," Hart said. "Equal access for all residents, regardless of background." "Including the Apache," Marshal Townsend noted, his tone unreadable. "Especially the Apache," Cole said firmly. "This was their land first. They taught us where to find water, how to preserve it. They deserve equal say in how it's used." The officials exchanged glances, Mrs. Morrison smiled. "That's exactly what we hope to hear. The territory is changing. Gentlemen, ladies, the old ways men like Pike ruling through force those days are ending. We need communities that can work together, that can model cooperation for the railroad towns to come." "Then you'll approve our water compact, Doctor?" Hart asked. "With full federal backing," Marshal Townsend confirmed. "In fact, we'd like to use Red Rock as an example for other settlements. Would you be willing to host delegations? Share your methods?" Cole felt Eve's hand slip into his. "We would," he said. "Together." The days that followed blurred together in a whirlwind of activity. The water compact was signed in a ceremony that brought together Mexican farmers, Anglo ranchers, Apache representatives, and Chinese merchants. Crow Dog himself came down from the mountains, marking the agreement with traditional symbols that would bind it in ways beyond mere paper. Through it all, Cole and Eve worked side by side. She established her permanent clinic in a proper building, with rooms for surgery and a dispensary stocked with medicines. He organized the well-digging crews and the water distribution system, ensuring every family had access. But it was the small moments Cole treasured most. Eve humming as she organized her medical supplies, the way she bit her lip when concentrating on difficult sutures, her laughter when Mrs. Chen's youngest daughter proclaimed she wanted to be a doctor too. The night before their wedding, Cole found himself at the Waterfall again, the place where everything had changed, where he'd stood naked in body and soul, where she'd walked straight into his arms and his heart. "Thought I'd find you here." Eve's voice came from behind him. "It's bad luck to see the bride before the wedding," he said without turning. "Good thing I don't believe in luck." She moved beside him, taking his hand. "I believe in choices, in courage, in love that's strong enough to wash away the past and nurture the future." They stood in comfortable silence, watching the water cascade endlessly down, patient and persistent as time itself. "Are you happy?" she asked finally. Cole considered the question. A year ago. He'd been a man running from his past, carrying guilt like stones in his chest. Now he was part of something larger, a community, a purpose, a partnership with a woman who saw all of him and chose to stay. "Yes," he said simply. "Are you—" "More than I ever thought possible." She leaned against him. "Though I do have one regret." His chest tightened. "What's that?" "That green beans take so long to grow. The ones I planted are barely sprouting." He laughed, the sound echoing off the canyon walls. "Patience, Doctor. Good things grow slow in the desert. Like love." "Like love." The wedding took place at sunset, the whole town gathering in the square where Luther Pike had once ruled through fear. Reverend Abel performed the ceremony, his voice carrying across the crowd as he spoke of water in the desert, of two streams joining to become a stronger river. Cole wore his best suit with his mother's knife at his belt, the wave pattern catching the dying light. Eve had chosen a simple dress of cream linen, practical enough that she could return to her patients if needed. Beautiful enough to take his breath away. Do you, Cole Running Fox, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold, in drought and plenty, in sickness and in health, as long as you both shall live? I do, Cole said, his voice strong and sure. Do you, Dr. Evelyn Hart, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband, to stand beside, to build with, to trust with your life and your heart, as long as you both shall live? I do, Eve said, her eyes bright with unshed tears. Then by the power vested in me by the territory of Arizona and the Lord above, I pronounce you husband and wife. Abel smiled. You may kiss your bride. Cole. The cheer that went up could probably be heard in Prescott. Mabel Quinn sobbed openly, claiming dust in her eyes. The Vasquez boys fired pistols in the air until their father cuffed them good-naturedly. Even Sheriff Briggs looked suspiciously misty-eyed. The celebration lasted well into the night. Tables groaned under the weight of food contributed by every family: Mexican tamales, Chinese dumplings, Apache fry bread, and American apple pie. Musicians played, children danced, and for one perfect evening, Red Rock forgot its struggles and simply rejoiced. As the stars came out, Cole and Eve slipped away to the small house they'd claimed at the edge of town, nothing fancy, but with a good well and room for the clinic expansion Eve planned. Welcome home, Mrs. Running Fox, Cole said as he carried her over the threshold. Dr. Running Fox, if you please, she corrected with a smile. I worked hard for that title. Dr. Running Fox, he amended. The most beautiful, brilliant, stubborn woman in the territory. Just the territory, she teased. In the world, he said, setting her down gently. In all the worlds that ever were or will be. Later, as they sat on their porch watching the stars wheel overhead, Eve said, The railroad comes through in 6 months. I know. Everything will change. New people, new challenges. There'll be those who want to push out the Mexicans, the Apache, anyone who doesn't fit their idea of progress. Then we'll stand against them, like we stood against Pike. Cole took her hand, tracing the calluses that marked her as a healer. We've proven different people can work together. We'll keep proving it. Together, she agreed. A coyote howled in the distance, answered by another. The desert was alive with its own rhythms, ancient and enduring. In the house behind them, on the table by the window, Eve's green beans were indeed sprouting in their pot, reaching toward tomorrow's sun. Tell me, Eve said, settling against his shoulder. What do you see when you look at Red Rock now? Cole considered. Where once he'd seen only a dying town ruled by fear, he now saw possibility. The new wells bringing life, the school under construction, the clinic that served all people equally, the bonds between communities that had learned to trust each other. I see home, he said finally. What do you see? The same, she said. Home, hope, and the man I love building something that will last. They sat in peaceful silence as the desert night wrapped around them. Tomorrow there would be work. There was always work. Wells to maintain, patients to treat, a town to nurture and protect. The railroad would bring its challenges, as would the politicians and profiteers who followed progress like vultures. But tonight, they had each other. They had water in the desert and love that had grown from conflict to triumph. They had a community that had learned to stand together and the promise of green beans sprouting on a windowsill. It was more than enough. It was abundance itself. And in the morning, when the sun painted the red rocks gold and the desert came alive with another day's possibilities, they would stand together and face whatever came. 2 streams joined into one river, flowing toward a future they would create with their own hands, their own choices, their own unbreakable love. The warrior had found peace, the healer had found her place, and in the heart of the desert, against all odds, they had found forever. Thank you so much for listening to this story of love, courage, and justice in the Old West. I hope Cole and Eve's journey touched your heart as it did mine. Please share in the comments where you're listening from. I'd love to connect with fellow Western story enthusiasts around the world and hear your thoughts on their adventure. If you enjoyed this tale, please subscribe to Wild West Night for more authentic frontier stories. Don't forget to like this video and hit that hype button to help more listeners discover this story of hope blooming in the desert. Until we meet again on the dusty trails of imagination, keep believing in love, justice, and the power of communities standing together. Happy trails, partners.